Was it really a puncture that almost took Hamilton's position in Austin, or is there something deeper and more dangerous hiding under the SF25's bodywork? What you are about to discover is not a simple technical failure, but a warning sign that could change Ferrari's destiny in this championship. The afternoon in Austin was about to end with relative calm. The sun was beginning to set on the Texan asphalt, the shadows were lengthening, and everything pointed to Ferrari sealing a strategic result. Fourth place for Hamilton, important points to consolidate the team in the fight for the runner-up spot. The SF25 had been competitive, but without the aggressiveness necessary to attack the three leaders of the day. However, the most valuable thing at that time was stability. Hamilton maintained a comfortable lead over Piastri. Nothing indicated a high-voltage outcome. And yet, in Formula One, when everything seems controlled, that is when true chaos rears its head. The final lap began with Hamilton crossing the finish line with more than 5 seconds ahead of the McLaren. Under normal conditions, this guaranteed a smooth defense. But just seconds after passing through turn 2, the car's behavior changed radically. The SF25 stopped responding accurately, especially at the front. The steering became imprecise, grip evaporated, and Hamilton, with more than 2 decades of experience in top-level motorsport, interpreted the situation immediately. Something was broken. His reaction on the radio was as instinctive as it was urgent. "I have no forward grip," he reported, followed by the most common suspicion in a situation like this. "Is it a puncture? I think I have a puncture." But it wasn't. What followed was a sudden loss of performance that completely threw the car off. In the high-speed corners, the section known as the Snake, composed of a fast and technical sequence of linked corners, the SF25 began to slide violently, demanding constant corrections. It was as if the front wing had disappeared, as if the front axle had suddenly been disconnected from the rest of the car. In a fraction of seconds, the advantage was diluted. In these types of curves, a loss of confidence translates into a drop in speed of more than 10 kilometers per hour. But Hamilton went further. In telemetry, Ferrari engineers saw how in just one corner the car lost 3/10. By the end of a section, the time lost was already more than 3 seconds. There was no room for doubt. SF25 was collapsing. But what was most disconcerting for the team was that the monitoring systems did not alert of any physical breakdown. There was no low pressure in the tires, there was no damage to the spoiler, there was no data that could simply explain what was happening. At first glance from the pit wall, the car looked intact. The contradiction between the pilot's perception and the data was total. And that in modern F1, where sensors measure everything, is an extremely rare scenario. Because if something has failed and not even the sensors detect it, the threat is more serious than it seems. It means that the failure is systemic, hidden in a dimension of the car that is not being diagnosed in real time. And that is one of the worst nightmares for any team. The anguish in Hamilton's cockpit grew. With each corner, the car refused to respond consistently. Braking into turn 11, a key overtaking area, Hamilton later declared that the car didn't want to brake. A comment that might seem emotional, but that in the technical context of that turn takes on important weight. If the hybrid system, responsible for recovering energy during braking and redistributing it, fails thermally, an imbalance is generated that affects even the traditional brakes. At that moment, the SF25 was not only unstable, was operating outside of its security parameters. What began as a suspected puncture was turning out to be an energy collapse in the middle of an area of high thermal demand on one of the most demanding tracks on the calendar. Piastri, for his part, was already on the hunt. From the McLaren wall, they had noticed everything. The time delta plummeted lap by lap. The Briton had entered the last lap relaxed, with the position secured. Now I had a McLaren with DRS activated just seconds behind. And there was still half a circuit to go. What sets Formula One apart from the rest of motorsport is not just speed or aerodynamic design, but the ability to capture, analyze, and act on data. Every meter traveled by car is backed up by thousands of records per second. Sensors distributed throughout the structure of the car provide real-time information ranging from brake pressure to the internal thermal distribution of the hybrid system. And it was precisely there in those data invisible to the viewer but vital to engineers where the true epicenter of the collapse that Lewis Hamilton suffered in Austin was discovered. By reviewing the telemetry traces lap by lap, Ferrari engineers identified an anomaly that could not have been predicted by simple observation. Starting at turn 4, the SF25 stopped generating the same hybrid power as in the previous laps. What was most notable was not just the drop in power delivery, but the way it occurred. It was not progressive. It was instant. From one corner to the next, the MGU-K, the kinetic generator responsible for recovering and then delivering additional power under acceleration, reduced its delivery by approximately 20%. In Formula One, that loss can mean up to 160 fewer horses at a key moment. The analysis revealed something even more disturbing. Coming into turn 11 braking, Hamilton applied pressure on the pedal at a similar point to previous laps. But the deceleration was minor. It was not a human error. The car was not stopping, as it should. The energy that was usually regenerated in the deep braking zone was not being channeled properly. This suggests that the recovery system, particularly the integration between MGU-K and MGU-H, was operating in a state of emergency. The overheating of the ERS, a problem that Ferrari had already timidly detected in practice, had reached its breaking point under the stifling heat of Austin, where the track exceeded 40 degrees Celsius during the race. That temperature not only affects tires, penetrates electrical systems, it damages the internal logic, deactivates lines of code that keep the car alive, but the most disconcerting thing was what came next. From turn 12 onwards, the data showed a partial recovery of the system. Performance returned, although not to 100%. Cornering times stabilized. What had happened? The most likely explanation is that the SF25's thermal control software, upon detecting temperatures outside the safe range, activated an automatic throttling to protect the ERS components. This caused a drop in power and altered balance. But once the car crossed the most heavily loaded areas, fast corners that demand aerodynamics and power simultaneously, and entered a slower section of the circuit, the systems managed to cool down enough to return to basic normal operation. It was a controlled blackout. An automatic reaction to avoid a major failure. That ability to self-protect prevented a disaster. But it exposed something even more worrying. SF25 is vulnerable to thermal collapse under critical conditions. The car that should perform in all temperatures showed a weak point that, in a single lap, almost ruined the result of its star driver. And in Formula One, when the system fails without leaving traces of physical damage, the most dangerous thing is not the failure, but rather its recurrence without prior warning. Most intriguing, however, was the recovery pattern. From turn 12, with the car going through a less demanding section in terms of sustained load, the system began to stabilize. Hamilton's pace improved, although without reaching the values prior to the failure. This suggests that the SF25 has a self-regulation system that, when detecting critical temperatures, activates an emergency protocol to reduce demand and allow a slight recovery. But is not a solution. It is a digital band-aid on a structural wound. The failure of the SF25 in Austin was not just a one-time incident on the last lap of a demanding race. It was a warning disguised as a positive result. Hamilton crossed the finish line ahead of Piastri, yes, but the real story is not in the standings. It is in the structure of a car that showed a critical vulnerability just when it most needed to be reliable. Furthermore, the failure not only threatens performance on the track, it also erodes pilot confidence. For a driver like Hamilton, accustomed to reading every reaction of the car to the millimeter, suddenly losing the braking reference or feeling that the car behaves erratically without warning is deeply destabilizing. Trust is an intangible but vital component, and once broken, it takes time to rebuild it. Internally, the team is forced to reconsider its operating margins. Maybe they should limit the use of certain engine maps. They may have to modify thermal settings at the cost of speed. All this means losing competitive advantage. And in such a tight championship, that small setback can be lethal. This is not just a reliability issue. It is a conceptual crack. A weakness in the backbone of the SF25 project. And unless Ferrari reacts with speed, technical humility, and the ability to adapt immediately, the outcome of its season could have been sealed in that final lap of Austin, without many having noticed it yet. Everything that happened in that last lap was not simply a mistake, nor a scare, nor just another anecdote to fuel the drama of the season. It was a crack revealed at the most vulnerable moment. A technical symptom that, if not diagnosed and treated urgently, can become a chronic illness for Ferrari. And this is where the conversation becomes bigger than a single driver, a single car, or a single race. What is at stake is not just points. It is the credibility of a project that was born with an immense promise to bring Ferrari back to the top of Formula One. And here, I leave you a direct question. Do you think Ferrari will be able to solve this overheating problem in time to stay in the fight for second place among the constructors? Or are we facing the first symptom of a season that once again is going to escape them due to internal failures? Subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed and comment what you thought of this video.